The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You can complain about games being on Peacock. You can complain about the officiating. You can complain that these games are on too late maybe for you. But you cannot stop the NFL money train. And the product that they put out, it's fabulous. That was great drama this weekend. If you are any kind of a sports fan, even a casual sports fan, you cannot have watched the 4 games this weekend, even the lopsided game for Baltimore, because that was a blowout in the second half, without coming away saying, man, this is really good stuff. This is like the pure cocaine of sports. Man, all 4 games, just fabulous. And yesterday, what an incredible day. The Detroit Lions are going back to the NFC Championship game. There you go, Washington. Now you're the leader in the clubhouse here, the longest drought between championship games. The Lions made it here in January of 1992, have not been back since. And now Washington holds the top spot as the Lions are headed off to the NFC Championship game at San Francisco coming up. Just absolutely great drama. And we'll get to that coming up. We'll talk about the 4 games from this weekend and what's ahead for the 2 championship games. One of them is going to be heard right here on ESPN 630 as the Baltimore Ravens have a 3 o'clock kickoff against the Kansas City Chiefs. It's the first time that Baltimore has hosted an AFC Championship game in 53 years, not since January of 1971, when the Baltimore Colts beat the Oakland Raiders to advance to Super Bowl V, where they beat the Dallas Cowboys in one of the greatest endings ever, but a game that was just dreadful to watch, just turnover after turnover. And finally, Jim O'Brien kicked the game-winning field goal as the Colts could feel a little bit better about themselves 2 years after losing to the New York Jets in the Super Bowl. And we'll get to that and reaction from the games. I want to play also in this hour, Ron Rivera did an interview with John Keim, and John wrote a story about it last week. But it's a 38-minute interview, and I pulled the highlights out of it because I think it's worth going through and hearing Rivera's explanation of things that went wrong, including the follow-up on the big flap that was in training camp about Eric Bieniemy, where it appeared that Ron Rivera threw him under the bus, saying that the players were complaining that his training camp was too hard. He explains the motivation behind that. I don't know if you're going to buy that or not, but you'll hear that coming up. And also, in the next hour, we'll look back on the 18th anniversary of Kobe Bryant's 81-point night. Yes, I know it's the 40th anniversary of Super Bowl 18. I know that. I do not want to relive that. That is one of the worst sports experiences of my life. That was horrible. That's worse than, for me anyway, striking out in Little League, because I used to strike out all the time. This was terrible. This was a day where Washington was playing the Raiders with a chance to make history, to become one of only 2 teams to that point. I guess 3 teams, because the Steelers had done it too. So one of only 3 teams to win back-to-back Super Bowls. And they had beaten the Raiders earlier that year. The 1983 season was an unbelievable year. They set a record with 541 points, which has since been broken. They were plus 43 on turnovers. They lost 2 regular season games, both on Monday night, both by 1 point. They blew through the Rams in the opening round of the playoffs, 51-7. They had a 21-0 lead on San Francisco, needed Mark Mosley to kick a field goal at the end, but they won that too. And they were favored to beat the Raiders in the Super Bowl, and it was just awful. And we relived some of it a few weeks ago when Jack Squirick passed away. Squirick with the rocket screen interception, which turned a game that was heading in the direction of the Raiders really into a blowout by halftime. It was pretty much over at that point. So that's as far as I'm going to go on that game, because it's just no fun to look back on that. Now, there is another anniversary today, January 22nd of 1983. That was the day that Washington beat the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship game, and that was fun. But I've done that a bunch of times, and I did that last year when it was the 40th anniversary. So we'll look back on Kobe's 81-point night, which was 18 years ago today, as he did it against the Toronto Raptors. All right, I'm sure you were watching at the end last night, the end of a great playoff weekend, as the Buffalo Bills appeared like they were going to send the game against Kansas City into overtime. And, this was certainly a makeable field goal. It was, windy conditions for sure. Buffalo in January is no fun to play in, but you figure Tyler Bass is going to make this field goal, and there's not going to be that much time left on the clock for Kansas City. Now, maybe Patrick Mahomes can take them down the field and set up the game winner for Butker. Maybe he can do that. But the reality is this game is going to go into overtime, and it looks like the Bills have the momentum, and the Bills are at home, and they're finally going to exercise the ghosts of the Kansas City Chiefs, who have beaten them one time after another in big games. So this is all set up. It's a mere formality. Bass makes the kick, and we go to overtime. Still some time left on the clock, but the reality is this game looks like it's headed for overtime. Jim Nantz with the call.
44 yards, Bass. No, he doesn't make it. Wide right. Wow. The two most dreaded words in Buffalo have surfaced again.
Great call. Steve Buckhantz texted me last night. He says that's why Jim Nantz is the best. If you're too young to remember, it was 34 years ago next week. Scott Norwood. And, it was Super Bowl. It was to win the game, not tie the game at that point. But in some regards, I guess Scott Norwood is off the hook. This was the national radio call of that kick from Jack Buck.
Norwood assumes the position. Lingner waits to snap it. We wait. There's a snap. There's a kick. It is up. It is no good. Norwood missed. 4 seconds left. The Giants have won Super Bowl 25 by the score of 20-19.
20-19 was the score, and that was a game where the Bills were heavily favored. They had that K-gun offense. This was not as good a Giant team as the one that had won the Super Bowl a few years earlier. Jeff Hostetler, the backup quarterback, was playing because Phil Simms was hurt. But Bill Belichick, defensive coordinator, had a great game plan for that game. He said, we're going to let them run because if they're running, they're not throwing. And by running, they're burning up the clock. And we plan to burn up the clock on offense, as O.J. Anderson was the MVP of that game, just grinding out yardage after yardage. They shorten the game. It comes down to a field goal. Scott Norwood makes it. The whole history of the Buffalo Bills has changed. That was the first of 4 consecutive Super Bowl losses. And if you are to look at their history, including the Music City Miracle and what has now happened to them in the playoffs, including last night, that's how they're recognized. They're the poor old Buffalo Bills. And what happened last night doesn't do anything really to change that. Now, Patrick Mahomes, he's going into this game this week as an underdog. The Chiefs are defending champions. They're coming to Baltimore on Sunday. They're 3.5-point underdogs. And this is one of those things that's kind of like when Michael Jordan played. Like, when Jordan played basketball, you could have named him the MVP every year. He was the best player in basketball. There's no argument about that, and I think he's the best player of all time. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football right now. He didn't have a great year by his standards. And Lamar Jackson, for what he did for the Ravens and the year that he had, he deserves to win his second MVP. But I think if you were to put them side by side and say, who would you like to have to win a game, I think you'd still like to see Patrick Mahomes, who always seems to do enough to win the game. His numbers from yesterday, not spectacular. 17 of 23 for 215 yards. But he found Travis Kelce twice, for touchdowns. They overcame mistakes that were made. They overcame the and people are going to get apoplectic about what the rules should be. But a fumble out of the end zone, which resulted in a touchback, all of that stuff. He was able to keep them on track and get them back to the AFC Championship game for the 6th consecutive year. That is stunning. In this day and age, where the game is set up so that you can, build your team up quickly from year to year. He's in the championship game for the 6th consecutive year. And going into this, you heard this all week long. Well, yeah, but, he's always played his playoff games at home. Now he's going to have to go into Buffalo, and he's going to have to win on the road. Is he going to be able to do that? Will he, facing adversity, be able to come back against a crowd that's against him? Didn't really seem to have a problem last night, did he? No, he didn't. This is Mahomes talking to the media about that narrative. Oh, God, now you got to do it on the road.
We played in the Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. We lost that one. I didn't like to bring that one up, but I mean, we've played basically road playoff games before. We just come in with the same mindset. If we're going to come together, put our best foot forward, and see if we can come out with a win, and that takes the mentality throughout the week. It takes every single play executing, and we did a great job of that today, and we're able to score enough to win.
Why have you guys been so efficient on the road over the years?
I think it's that. Guys come together. I mean, I love being Arrowhead. I love being Arrowhead and playing in front of that crowd. But when you're on the road, it's you versus them. It's you versus everybody in the stadium, and you have to come together as a team. And the guys do that. And you saw that in the game today. I think that spoke well. Through 3 quarters offensively, we were moving the ball up and down the field, but we got shut down in the 4th quarter. And I went over to the defense and I told them, I said, hey, y'all shut it down, and we'll win this football game. We'll go to the AFC Championship game. And they did, going into that 4th quarter. And I told them next time I'll try to tell them earlier. If I can tell them like halftime to do that, and they're going to just shut them out from there. No, but it was a team win, and that's what you need in playoffs.
You ever have a sense during the games that what epic games these kind of games are, and you ever take even a second to appreciate that? I do, honestly. Every time I go up against Josh, I know that it's going to come down to the end, just because of the competitor that he is and the player that he is. Same when I go up against Joe, when I go up against Lamar, all these guys. And I know how much fire they have, and they're not going to give up to the very end. And you appreciate that stuff. I mean, these are the games I watched growing up. The great quarterbacks going up against each other with great football teams, great organizations. And that's what I remember. And so hopefully I'm making, like I said earlier in the week, hopefully we're making those memories for other little kids that are growing up watching football.
It is kind of playing out like Brady and Manning. Eventually, I think Josh Allen's going to win one of these. I would not give up on him. People say, well, look, he gets in these games and he can't win the big one, and he throws interceptions. He didn't throw any interceptions last night. He was 26 of 39 for 186 yards. He had more big runs, 12 carries for 72 yards. His defense was beat up. They had a lot of injuries there. And Kansas City's been there, done that, and I think that made a difference. I don't denigrate Josh Allen. Now, some are criticizing him in setting up that field goal, which was, 44 yards, that he threw 2 incompletions before that. Should have maybe found a way to grind out some more yardage, either to make it a shorter field goal or possibly pick up another first down and get the ball into the end zone. Yeah, maybe so, but didn't happen. I just think that we're looking at the greatest quarterback of this era in Patrick Mahomes, with a great football team, with a tight end who ain't going to play forever. There are rumors that Travis Kelce is playing his last season, and he's still got it. And in big moments, you saw Mahomes hit him twice for touchdowns last night. He can still do that. So I would not throw dirt on the Buffalo Bills. It's just that their history does suggest that in these kind of games, they lose, and they lose in heartbreaking ways. As for the Detroit Lions, and let me once again read into the record how wrong I was about Dan Campbell. Yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of that famous biting kneecaps news conference that he did. And I thought, oh, God. And I said it. I went on this long rant about what a lunkhead he is, and this guy's going to be one and done. And, yeah, it started out terribly. I think they were 1-10 in his first season starting out. Got a little bit better. And then last year had a great finish to the season. Didn't quite make the playoffs. And this year they're in, and they're going to the NFC Championship game. And I got to give him a lot of credit. He's very genuine. I loved his interview with Tracy Wolf. It wasn't Tracy Wolfson. It was, I guess, whoever was doing it for NBC. I forget who it was. But maybe it was Melissa Stark, where he said, hey, about Baker Mayfield getting that tying touchdown just before the half. He said, hey, let's play a football, okay? We're playing a good team here. Go out, do your job, have fun. And they did. They won the game. This was Campbell celebrating in the locker room, including with the linebacker who got the game-cinching interception.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you, we talked about it all year. This started a long time ago. You're built for this. You were built for this, man. And look what you guys did. You went out there, and it's another hot team that we knocked off. It's the next hot team that you knock off. Do you know how hard it is to win in this league in the playoffs? Do you understand what you're doing right now? What we're capable of? That's 2. All right, that's 2. We got 2 to go. With a bye in the middle. I'm unbelievably proud of everybody in here, man. Coaches, players. That's the way to mount up, man. That's a fucking difficult team to beat, man. All right, I got 1 game ball. Man, in the game, need to fucking play. Derek Barnes.
Hey, man, love y'all boys, man. From the support in the linebacker room, the coaches, staff, organization, offense, man. 3 years, man. It took me 3 years to get the first interception. But it means more because the people who believed in me. A lot of people didn't. The room. This ball, I got to give it to the linebacker room because I said we was going to bring one back, and God, we did. And you got to believe how far we can go, man. Yes, believe it now. Believe it now. This is a good win. Enjoy it, man. This comes once in a lifetime. Like Alex used to tell me, man, a lot of people don't make it this far, but we did, man. I love everybody in this room, man. Everybody in here deserves it. That's why we here, like Coach said. Hey, man, time to prepare for San Fran.
Yeah, they are 7-point underdogs going into that game. But I like Derek Barnes, a little bit of self-deprecating humor there, too. It took me 3 years to get an interception. What an interception it was as it locks up the win as Baker Mayfield's comeback attempt comes short. So now you've got this team that boy, you talk about an underdog role, and they're 7-point underdogs against a team that's predicted to win the World Championship this year. But the cast-off, Jared Goff, it was just a salary cap maneuver when they traded him to the Detroit Lions for Matt Stafford, and he's resuscitated his career. And Dan Campbell, who people like me said, this is a joke, you can't coach like that. Look at him now. This is Goff and Campbell.
Yeah, you think about the dark times there early on in 2021. A lot of people calling for his head. A lot of people in this room calling for his head. And it's pretty good to be able to sit up here and be able to play in the NFC Championship. And it feels good.
Ultimately, once you get in, then it's about matchups, and you find a way to win. And you may have to win 2-0, and it's okay. It's okay. A win's a win in the playoffs. So, here we are, and now we get to go to San Francisco and. We know what kind of team that is, but we're in a great position. We've got a great opportunity.
I don't want to say like this arrogantly, but we expected to win the first game. We expected to win this game, and now we get to go to a game we expected to be in against a really good team at their place, and we're going to come into it expecting to win. It'll be a tough game, but it'll be fun.
And Jared Goff has been to a Super Bowl before. Let's not forget that. As for Baker Mayfield, the Bucs say they want him back. This has worked out very, very well for him. I thought it would have been a good idea to bring him in here, but they had already committed to Sam Howell as the starter, whereas Tampa was open, and he won the job. They'd have brought him here with a chance to win the job. Who knows, what would have happened in this past season? But that's over, and he's now on a team that made it into the divisional round of the playoffs and beating himself up afterwards. This is Baker Mayfield, along with the explanation, and I'll get to more on this with Todd Bowles as to why he didn't call a timeout at the end of the game when he could have forced a field goal attempt. I find his explanation to be a little bit weak, but again, this is Mayfield and Bowles after the Bucs loss in Detroit yesterday.
It sucks. I feel like my heart just got ripped out, but football's a complex game, but it's also simple. It comes down to taking care of the ball. And in 2-minute drives like that, when you know you're going to have 4 downs to use, just a bad mistake by me.
3rd and 12, Goff kneeled, about 36 seconds left, and he had a timeout. I just wanted to ask why perhaps he didn't take that timeout.
They already had a field goal and lined up, and there would have been about 12 seconds left on the clock to end the ball game. We weren't going to come back from that. No sense of prolonging the obvious.
Well, I don't know about that. Things can happen. A field goal can get blocked, return the other way for a touchdown. That happens. The field goal can be missed. That leaves you time on the clock, even if it's just 12 seconds to get a Hail Mary. if they give you the timeout, you might as well use them. If you walk off the field with a timeout in your pocket, it does you no good. I don't buy that, and I think it's kind of a give up mentality that you don't want to pass along to your football team. He's a good coach. Look, they were not expected to get as far as they did this year, but that's not a strategic move. It was just weird at the end of the game. It's like both coaches went, game's over, let's just run it out. And Detroit was snapping the ball with plenty of time left on the play clock. It didn't really play out like the usual end of a game. May not be a big deal, and it probably wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. It's just that when you say, they would have kicked the field goal there in 12 seconds, and why prolong the obvious? That's not a message that you want to give to your football team. Speaking of message, the message that Ron Rivera leaves behind as he leaves town, did a lengthy interview with John Keim, and I'm going to play some of the highlights of that as we continue. Also in the next hour, as I continue to go through these great Joe Buck interviews, I got one with Lynn Swann, who is in the Hall of Fame with 336 career catches. That is like a fifth, little bit more than a fifth of what Jerry Rice had. But if you saw him play, your eyes would tell you Hall of Famer. And we'll get to that in the next hour. Coming up, again, Ron Rivera speaks to John Keim. What went wrong here? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up on a Monday. Got sunshine out there. Going to melt some of this ice and the snow. It's going to be like 41 today, and based on what we had over the weekend, it's going to feel like 60, and it's supposed to be like 65 at the end of the week. Crazy. You may be one of those people that says, come on, let's move on. I'm sick of hearing from Ron Rivera. I want to hear what's next. I do too, and I'm very anxious to see who the next coach of the team is going to be. The Commanders interviewed Ben Johnson on Friday. Because Detroit won, they can't talk to him in person until at least a week from today. Or maybe no matter what happens, whether Detroit makes it to the Super Bowl or not, they'll be able to follow up with a second interview. But he's very much in demand. A lot of teams want to talk to him. He did 5 or 6 interviews on Friday, as I understand it. Bobby Slowick, who did a good job with Houston. Now, they were totally stymied on the run by Baltimore on Saturday. But Baltimore is tough on everybody against the run. But Slowick, I think, did a really good job with a rookie quarterback this year, and I think that's what you're going to be looking at here. They're probably going to draft somebody in the first couple of picks, and they need somebody who can develop them, and Slowick has proven that. So there are other candidates that they're talking about. It's been reported that they talked to Eric Bieniemy. I think certainly they owed him that. I don't think they're going to hire Bieniemy, but by giving him an interview, they're saying to other teams, we seriously considered keeping him as the head coach, and he's still under contract. Got to remember this about Bieniemy. The rest of the coaching staff, their contracts run out, I think it's March. With Bieniemy, he's got another year left. So theoretically, they could hire a head coach, and the head coach should say, I like Eric Bieniemy. I'd like to keep him around as an offensive coordinator. And theoretically, the team could say to Bieniemy, you're our offensive coordinator. You're under contract to do that. And if you don't want to do that, we can prevent you from coaching anywhere else in that position. You can leave for a head coaching job, but not for a coordinator job. So there's that. But there are stories that Rivera tells to John Keim that I wanted to pass on to you I don't know if it's going to change your mind. Obviously, it was a terrible ending when you finish 4-13, when you didn't have a winning season over the 4 years. It's a failure. It's an abject failure of what happened. Obviously, you start with the number one question when something like that happens, and that's about regrets. And this is Rivera talking to John Keim about that last week.
We were fortunate enough to win a division our first year, but I think that kind of threw some of the expectations out of whack. And then just kind of being right there in the middle of the last 2 years. And then this year, I took a big gamble. I put a lot on Sam, and now as I reflected on that, the thing I probably shouldn't have put as much pressure on him. And I think that was probably one of the mistakes I made this year. the biggest one I think I made was I put way too much on him, and he didn't deserve to have that put on him. He's a good young quarterback who has some talent and some ability, and I should have. I think that's something I should have backed off on.
And how so? Like, was it just by announcing him as a starter, or what other way? Were there other ways that you felt like there was more?
I think I should have kept emphasizing he was going to be the guy that got the first opportunity.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? To be QB1, not that he's coming in as QB1. He's going to have the first opportunity. I think just phrasing it that way would have taken a lot of pressure off of him. Just kind of, that he hadn't been anointed. And I think that's kind of the mistake I made, because the perception came out wrong. And that's on me.
How did you feel he handled that? Did you feel like it did a little bit, or?
No, I think he handled it tremendously well. He really did, but he shouldn't have had to have as much pressure as he had, in my opinion. And that's, like I said, that's not me because of the way I put it out there. If I put it out there, that this guy's going to start off as the first guy getting the first opportunity, and emphasize opportunity, continue to emphasize the opportunity. I think it came across wrong. I think it was taken wrong, but I could have presented it better, to be honest.
All right, two things there. First, he starts out talking about making the playoffs the first year and raising expectations. No, expectations were not raised with a 7-9 record and Taylor Heineke playing quarterback. He was fun. He was plucky. It was really cool to see him compete with Tom Brady in a playoff game, but nobody thought the future was Taylor Heineke. Okay, and there was a lot to do because it had already failed with Dwayne Haskins. He was cut, and sadly, a year or so later, he was killed in a car accident after he was with Pittsburgh. You still didn't have a quarterback at that point. The roster was not good. We knew that it was going to take time. So going 7-9 in an unusual year where the division was just crapola, just terrible. Dak Prescott was hurt, among other things. And you had Doug Peterson, who was apparently told to tank in the last game of the year against the Eagles. So I don't think expectations were raised. As far as the Sam Howell thing, yeah, I mean, he made a big mistake. And hindsight, as Steve Spurrier once said, is 50-50. Obviously, with what Baker Mayfield just did, the move would have been to make Mayfield a huge offer and bring him in here and let Sam Howell learn from him. I thought if Mayfield didn't get another offer, he would be a good guy to bring in here besides Jacoby Brissett, and then have Howell compete for the job. And maybe, hindsight as well, I don't think it would have saved Ron Rivera's job, because I think his strategy with new ownership was to say, here's our young quarterback. He's in our second year, and he's cheap. You can build around him because you're only paying him $1 million a year for the next 2 years. And look at what I've done to develop. And you give me an opportunity to keep going with him, I think I could do something. I think that might have been his strategy. If he brings in Jacoby Brissett and Brissett wins the job and competes and they have a mediocre year, they finish around 500, that's not a really good selling thing for the owners. I think that was a part of it. But it was, in hindsight, really foolish to take a guy who was a fifth-round pick who'd played one game through exactly 19 passes in a game against a disinterested Dallas team and say, here's our guy. We're fully committed to him as our quarterback. And there were some good moments, but we saw at the end of the year he fell back to being what a lot of people thought he was when he was coming out of college, that they had seen the flaws. Remember, what happened to him this past year somewhat mirrored his college career. Had he been able to come out after his sophomore year, which he wasn't able to do at North Carolina, he was going to be a first-round pick. He got another year looking at him in his junior year, and people saw the flaws, and he slipped to the fifth round. And it's not like the whole league was blind and Washington went, you missed one, I got him. We got him. We got our quarterback of the future. So I take those things with a grain of salt. This is about... And Rivera put his foot in his mouth many times over the 4 years. He tried to be honest. I'll give him that. But many times what he would say would come back to bite him. And I'm not saying he's attacking the media here, but this is really a pretty soft media market. This isn't like New York. It's not like Chicago. I worked in New York for 5 years. I've been to Chicago. I don't know much about the media market. Dallas, even in Dallas, I was there for 3 years. I thought even Dallas was tougher than this one. This is Rivera on how his words, I don't want to say twisted, but how his words were used in some ways against him by the media.
This particular group of reporters, I think, I felt there were several people that were looking for the "I gotcha" moments, the aha moment. Oh, see, okay, you're contradicting yourself. Instead of really trying to, I think everybody's always trying to interpret what you say, and there's not necessarily a hidden meaning to what I say or anybody that you're interviewing is saying, and I think that's one of the things that I always found difficult because. I would walk away and I would ask Sean DeBarbier, did I say something wrong? Did I put it wrong? And we'd have to go back and look at it. And he'd sometimes get me the transcripts so I could, reread them. And to me, that's frustrating at times that people want to, translate what you're saying or try and interpret it. And one of the things that I always hate is when a month and a half later, somebody says, well, back in August, you said, well, I'm entitled to change my opinion. I'm entitled to change my mind. I'm saying it's my prerogative. Because again, I'm trying to get to what the best decision, the best, situation is for us. And that was one of my frustrations as well.
Well, that's fine. But if you've changed your mind, you need to tell people. Because if a quote is thrown back at you from a few months earlier, you need to say, yes, that's what I thought at the time, but this is what I think now. He never really did that. So I don't buy that. As far as his words, people looking for a different meaning. Remember, this group of reporters has come off the Bruce Allen era, where Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder didn't mind lying to your face and didn't mind saying ridiculous things like, hey, we're winning off the field or the culture is damn good. So, if there's skepticism here, Ron, you got to realize the scars are pretty deep. You took over 20 years into the Dan Snyder ownership. A lot had gone on before you got here. It maybe wasn't that way in Carolina, and Carolina is a smaller market. And you also had, and this is a very important point, you had a quarterback. You had Cam Newton. Guys came in together. If you have one of those, things look a lot different. So there's that. Then there's the offensive line. And over the course of the 4 years, he never built the offensive line. This is now Rivera saying, well, we let two really great players get away, Trent Williams and Brandon Sheriff. I tried to keep them, but I couldn't do it. Trent Williams, he's going to make his 12th Pro Bowl now. He's coming back for 14th year. He's one of the best left tackles of all time, and Brandon Sheriff is an all-pro, now playing in Jacksonville. So this is Rivera on letting those guys go away. I think it's his fault. And in hindsight, he should have done everything possible. He should have thrown himself in front of them and said, what do you want? What do you want? Stay. But this is his version of seeing those two players leave here over the course of his first 2 years.
I mean, the dude's a phenomenal player. And if there had been any way we could have worked something out and keep I mean, he's a generational left tackle. He comes in, he plays 12, 15 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, and his athleticism and who he is as a player. I mean, that was special. And then you had, a right guard, and that's special. And we couldn't work anything out with him. We constantly had to always, try and figure out how we can keep him. And then eventually you just can't afford to keep him anymore.
With Trent, because you had the meeting with him, and it seemed like it went pretty well. Yep. Was there anything that you could have done differently, or did you feel like that? Because I know, initially you had said you wanted guys to show what they could do with your group, how is that accurate? And was there anything you could have done differently?
What I would have loved to have seen is just the ability to have him come in and go through a mini camp and watch these guys. I mean, it's happened to me twice where you go in and you don't get to look at the players. You don't get a chance to have them truly around and find out who's who, and then go into the draft. Okay. And then decide, okay, what's the most important thing that you have to do? You know what I'm saying? We were going off of the tape. We were going off of, in some cases, some guys had very limited tape. Okay, we were going off of what we had as far as analytics, and then trying to interpret all those things for players without really knowing the players. I think that was one of the hardest things that I've had to deal with in both my stints as a head coach, is that first year trying to evaluate. When I was in Carolina, you were going off of what people were telling you. Well, the hard part is they don't necessarily know what fits what you're trying to do. And in some cases, the player is maybe better suited for something different. And that's something that we learned through the process of training camp, not, the beginning of the off-season workout program, week 1, phase 1, week, 3, phase 2, week 7, we're week 7. Now you're in phase 3, and then minicamp. I mean, those things are all very important evaluation tools, and we didn't get to evaluate it all. So that was a frustration for us. But not being able to get something work out with Trent, that was hard, because I would love to have seen him. And when you get a chance to see a guy like that, you sit there and go, oh my God. You say, we can watch him on tape, but remember, he didn't play the most of last, that year before. And, because they were having issues with him, it was probably very hard for him also to forgive, what had happened to him. And I respect that. And that was one of the things. And my conversations with him were terrific. I see, why he's so special, especially when you watch him now, and he's still going at this age.
Yeah.
And then the other frustration was, then you come in and you've got, one of the premier right guards who's still playing at a high level, and you can't do anything to get his contract taken care of, because basically when it should have been done, it didn't get done.
Well, okay. First of all, it's ridiculous that you needed an off-season workout program to determine whether or not Trent Williams fit what you did. If you're a casual football fan, he's the best left tackle. So that's an excuse, and he used that too for Carolina. Remember, he came in 2011, which was a lockout year. The season started, training camp started a little bit late. The only thing that got knocked out, I think, was the Hall of Fame game. But we did have a lockout that year, so his offseason was limited at coming to Carolina, and we had the pandemic here, which, caused them to do everything by Zoom, and they couldn't bring anybody in and all that stuff. But come on, you want us to buy that because you didn't have a chance to evaluate Trent Williams in an off-season workout program that you didn't know whether you wanted to bring him back. And as far as, Brandon Sheriff and his deal wasn't done when it was supposed to get done, well, that's blaming the people of the past, which, is fair game because they were terrible. But Andrew Brandt, who was front office executive with the Packers, he writes about this stuff all the time. You learn how to deal with the salary cap, and you keep the players you want to keep. It's very rare that a player who a team really wants leaves by free agency, unless you're not experienced, and he wasn't, and he isn't good at this. He isn't good at being an administrator. He's probably, people rise to their level of incompetence. It's called the Peter Principle, and he is probably a guy who's a very good defensive coordinator, marginal head coach, and a terrible administrator when he's running the whole show. And so, asked by John Keim, would you do things differently if you had the opportunity? In looking back, here's what he said.
Oh, I think I would have loved a different model, just because, well, in hindsight, yes. Because now you really see how much more time you spend on personnel, and as a coach, that's not necessarily what you want to do. In my opinion, what I really enjoyed more than anything else the last 5 weeks was just being right in the middle of everything as far as coaching. I mean, that was a completely different thing, because, now you're immersed. Now your only focus is just that one thing. And that's really what I think coaches really have to, you that's what you do. You want to teach.
You still want to coach?
Oh yeah. I enjoyed the heck of it. I really do. And that's quite honestly, John, that's what I do. I got away from it for 3.5 seasons and really felt like I was more of a manager. things kept coming across. I mean, some of this, just stupid stuff at times too would come to me that made no sense that it was being brought to me.
Like what? Anything you can say?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Just, it was just stuff that, it shouldn't have been put on the head coach's plate. But at the time when I was dealing with it, I wasn't necessarily the head coach as much as I was, the manager.
What, and as far as coaching continues, like, would you want to only be a head coach? Would you say I'd be open to being a defensive coordinator, coaching in college? What would you have in mind? I think there, right now, what we've decided is keep all the options open. We've had some conversations with some people and some teams, and we're really just kind of waiting to see what happens after this week. This weekend is where everybody's expecting, the movement to start and begin. And obviously we've taken the approach that we're gonna wait it out. We're gonna listen. I have several opportunities right now. I just want to make sure it's the right one more than it is anything else. Opportunities in the NFL?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Would it be hard to go back and be a DC after being a head coach for so long?
No, not where I am in my career. And I do know this, sometimes you do have to take a step back. I mean, I took a step back from being a coordinator to being a position coach. And 2 years later, or 3 years later, I come back and have the #1 defense in the league. So, to me, you take a step back, shoot, you learn and grow from it. It's like I told our players, if you look at this year as a lost year, you're screwing yourself. But you should look at it as a year to learn and understand why. Things happen to people. They don't have, they don't happen to people. Things happen for people. And to me, this is probably the greatest learning experience I've had in a while this year. I mean, there a lot of things came to light at certain times this past season that I think going forward will really help me.
So what he's telling you there, he told you how much he liked being the defensive coordinator for the last 5 weeks. That's pretty much who he is. And he said, how great it was to focus on one thing. Well, that again tells you how poor he was at trying to run the whole operation. That's his downfall. He's probably a good defensive coordinator, and that's where he will probably finish up his coaching career and may do a good job, may be a part of a championship team. Who knows? But taking on everything like he didn't work out and really wasn't what he wanted to do. And, he said dealing with the stupid stuff. Well, he probably knew there was some percentage of stupid stuff he was going to have to deal with going to this organization. Did he know the Washington Post a few months after he took the job would unleash this big investigation on sexual harassment in the organization that would ultimately lead Dan Snyder to change the name of the team and sell the team and everything that went along with it and all the questions he had to answer about the dysfunction of the organization? Yeah, I don't think he could have counted on all that. But you have to take on a share of Michigas when you work for Dan Snyder. That's understood. So he's kind of telling you who he is. He's a guy that the job was too much for him, that the whole big Megillah was too much. Last thing is about what in his last training camp, what he had to deal with. And as he said, he put his foot in his mouth. He was asked about Eric Bieniemy and the tough training camp, and he said, yes, some players had come to him and complained. And that blew up. Like, oh, there he goes. He's throwing his offensive coordinator under the bus. This is Bieniemy. This is Rivera trying to explain the strategy behind what he said to the media.
So I wanted the players to go to him,
right?
Work it out with him, not with me. I mean, again, if you want something done, go to that source. Work, and that's what I thought happened during training camp. When that, I had made my statement trying to show my support for the guy. Apparently got misconstrued. There was people interpreting what I was saying. And really, trying to get the players to go see him and develop that relationship, get to understand what he was trying to teach and why he was trying to teach it.
Well, I don't think people were necessarily interpreting what you said when you said it in a very clear way, that you had players coming to you. So you're already telling the media that you have a structure in place which allows people to go over the heads of their superiors to complain about that person. I've been in the working world for a long time. This is my 47th year in radio. And there have been times, not necessarily involving me, but I've seen it with other people, where there's like a program director and you go over the head of the program director to complain about him to the general manager. And sometimes the general manager will get mad and say, hey, you're talking to the wrong guy. You got to talk to your superior here. Sometimes it comes back to bite the program director, where he gets called in and said, hey, this guy's complaining about you. And then they drop it down on him. No, I mean, I don't think it's misinterpreting anything. You said it. And what he was saying to the players, hey, go directly to Eric, don't go to me. Well, you don't say that to the media. You might say something along the lines of, yes, Eric has his players, and I'll let Eric, deal with that. He does a news, that throughout the season and even the preseason, the offensive coordinator speaks every Thursday. So you could have, if you really wanted it that way, you could have said to the media, well, if you got questions about Bieniemy and his players, you ought to ask Eric about that. He is the offensive coordinator. He's the co-head coach. Remember, they gave him a big title. That was part of him coming here, not just to be offensive coordinator. So a lot of things that he did poorly, and he did it, as we find out, really. And I would urge you, if you're really interested, to watch the whole interview. It's about 35 minutes. You get the impression of a guy who's, I think, a good man, good honest person, good person, who just was in over his head trying to do all these jobs, and it turned out to be disastrous for him. He may be a head coach, but he did take a team to a Super Bowl. He did it with the MVP of the league at quarterback, so there's a big advantage. But in reality, he's not a CEO. He's, as sometimes you used to hear, he's a good Indian. He's not a great chief. So there you go. But given what he had to deal with, and he said, he's gone out to dinner with his wife a couple of times since being fired, and people are coming up to him and telling him, hey, Ron, you did what you could in an impossible situation. And I feel pretty much the same way. All right, that'll put a lid on that. We move forward and see who's going to be the next coach, and watch the developments over the next week or so. Can't do anything with what their reported top target is. Ben Johnson, can't talk to him in person until after Monday, when after the Lions play the 49ers in the NFC Championship game. Coming up, what John Harbaugh said to the media after his team won on Saturday against the Houston Texans. Bothers me. See if it bothers you. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. 18 years ago today, Kobe Bryant scored 81 points, the second highest total in the history of the NBA, second only to Wilt Chamberlain's 100 points for the Philadelphia Warriors in March of 1962 against the New York Knicks. Kobe did it on a Sunday evening against the Toronto Raptors. He did it at home. He didn't do it in Hershey, Pennsylvania, like Wilt Chamberlain. And unlike Wilt, the nation could see it. It's on TV, and it's on YouTube now if you want to watch the whole thing. The only thing remaining from Wilt's 100-point performance, no still pictures, no television, no film, a little bit of a radio broadcast, and Wilt sitting in the locker room with a piece of paper with the number 100 written on it by Harvey Pollack, who is the media director for the Philadelphia Warriors. It's one of the most iconic sports photos of all time, but that's all that remains of what he did. What Kobe did, we can look back on it. We can hear from players who played against him. I mean, there's a lot to dissect on that, and we'll do that coming up at 10:45. Also want to play another part of another conversation that was done by Joe Buck as these things continue to bubble up on YouTube. Loving this. I just went through one on Joe Namath. We're going to play that tomorrow. Lynn Swann, who's a Hall of Famer with numbers that are not Hall of Fame receiving numbers, but he was great when it counted most, and he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He talks to Joe Buck about his remarkable career. And when you listen to these interviews, this is the thing that I always love about it. There's always a part of it where it almost didn't happen. Like certain things had to fall into place, or he or she was never going to become what that person became. Interests in other things, not necessarily sports. And Lynn Swann was one of them. His mother gave him ballet lessons at a time where you didn't give boys ballet lessons. Man by the name of Lynn taking ballet lessons, and he goes on to become one of the great football players of all time. Let me get to this. This is bothersome to me. I think religion is a private thing. Now, yes, you hear me say a lot of Yiddish words, and I talk about being Jewish. Yes, I do. I do talk about that. That's who I am. But I'm not talking about God. I'm not talking about what your personal or my personal beliefs are about the religious part of it. I look at it as the cultural part of being Jewish. And as I often say, we don't recruit. So I'm not trying to convince you, if you're not Jewish, to become Jewish, or if you are Jewish, to be more Jewish. That's not what I'm doing here. So keep that in mind. But when you hear athletes talking about God, I'm not crazy about that, but I understand it because it's an athlete talking about himself or herself. So those are his or her personal beliefs, and if they want to, give them out in media, that's up to them. That's okay, but they represent themselves. John Harbaugh is the coach of the Baltimore Ravens. He represents an enormous organization and 53 players who play for him of various beliefs. Some of them may be religious. Some of them, they may be agnostic. They may not have any religion. Who knows? But that's their own personal belief. And bringing religion into the locker room is not something I've ever been a big fan of. I think that should be your own personal belief. And I have been around some incredibly successful and very religious coaches. I covered Tom Landry early in my career, and Tom Landry used to spend the offseason with the Billy Graham Crusade. He was very religious, but I never heard him talk about God when he was talking to the media. He may have done that with his players, but never with the media. Never saw him do that. Joe Gibbs, of course, very, very religious, man of God, and when he's away from his role as coach of the team, he will talk openly about that. And look, there have been stories of players who are not necessarily religious, but pretend to be more religious to curry favor with the coach because of his beliefs. There have been reports that Redskin players did that over the years. Okay, but that's inside the locker room. When a coach speaks to the media and talks about what his team did, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, there you go. When a coach speaks to the media, when he talks about his team, he should be talking about the football game. So I was a little put off by this, and I like John Harbaugh, and I like the way he speaks to reporters. He's very respectful. He answers the questions thoroughly. I'm a big fan of the whole family. The dad I've met, Jack Harbaugh, met him once. He didn't know who I was, and I knew who he was, but he couldn't have been a nicer guy. We met actually in a lobby at a Super Bowl. Must have been when Jim's the two brothers were playing, and he was a guy who was celebrated all week. He was doing a bunch of interviews. Here he was standing out in the lobby by himself, and I just went up and introduced myself to him, and we had a really nice chat. A really good person, and I think Jim is probably a good person. A little odd, a little different than John, but I think they're good people, and obviously it's a great family, a successful family. But in my mind, this, to me, was off-putting the way he opened up the news conference after his team beat Houston on Saturday in Baltimore 34-10.
Just want to start off with this. This is something that was sent to me before the game, and it just is meaningful to me, so I'm going to share it with you because I think it's the right thing to do. And it's a verse. Greatness, power, glory, victory, and honor belong to you because everything in heaven and on earth belongs to you. The kingdom belongs to you, Lord. You are the head and the ruler over everything. So there's an amazing spirit on this team, and just want to kind of give honor and glory where it's due.
Well, he said it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Nothing wrong with believing that, and it was nice that somebody sent him that. And if he wanted to share it with the team privately, that's up to him. Although, I've heard from players like John Riggins that they didn't like the pregame prayer, that they thought that there's no place for that either. And I thought what John Harbaugh did was wrong. That's not the right thing to do in that circumstance. Away from the team, much like Tom Landry on the Billy Graham Crusade or Joe Gibbs when he's doing private interviews with people, and it's about religion, and he would do that from time to time, or he could talk to his race team that he owns, or he could even talk to the football team about it if he chooses to. But in a media setting like that, that's not the right thing to do. It's not. And if I'm Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the team, I take him aside and I say, hey, you've done a great job as a coach this year. You got your team in the AFC Championship, and we got a home game, and I'm really excited about that. But in that setting, in a setting like that, where you are representing 53 men, you're not just speaking for yourself. The head coach has a totally different role than a player. There's no place for that. And what you did there is not something that I would want to continue. You did it once. It was something that was sent to you. It was obviously meaningful to you. If you would have referenced something that was sent to you and someone sent you that had a lot of deep meaning to you, that's fine. But proselytizing really is what you're doing there to the media. There's no place. I know that people will be upset about that and say, oh, you shut up. You can't, stop doing that. No, that's the way I feel, and I wouldn't try and force my religion on anybody else, and I don't think what he did was the right thing to do there, even though he said it's the right thing to do. All right, moving on to the game. There's really nobody else I'd like to listen to besides Roquan Smith. He talks football, and you can tell why this guy is such a great leader. And that defense was awesome for the Ravens. Houston scored 10 points, but they scored 7 on a 67-yard punt return by Steven Sims. Remember Steven Sims? A cast-off from Washington. He was here 4 years ago, was half decent. It was a special teams mistake. It was a bad punt, and he took it back 67 yards for a touchdown. Other than a field goal, that's all the scoring that Houston did. That really should have been a 34-3 game, not a 34-10 game. And at 10-10 at the half, there were a lot of people going, Ravens, regular season Ravens, playoff Ravens, referencing what happened 4 years ago when they were in a similar spot. They were 14-2. They had a first-round bye, and they hosted a playoff game against Tennessee, and they got run over by Derrick Henry. They lost a lopsided game. Lamar threw 3 interceptions. Well, in this game, Lamar was great. Ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for 2 touchdowns, blew the game open in the second half, winning 34-10. And as for the doubters about the playoff Ravens, Roquan Smith, who's relatively new, remember he came here in a trade with Chicago at the trade deadline last year and has quickly taken over as the leader. Here's his message to those people.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there's 11 people on our offense and 11 people on our defense and 11 people on special team that plays, not what anybody else has to say. They don't put the pads on, so who cares what they have to say? At the end of the day, that's an opinion. That's just like a butt. Everybody has them. You know what I mean? So I don't really concern myself with that, nor do anyone in this locker room, because it's outside noise at the end of the day. And honestly, I didn't know too much about it, and I really don't care.
All right. Now, more from Roquan Smith, and this is really what they did defensively. Houston, you could say they have a rookie quarterback, okay, and a defensive-minded coach, but they played great, even with the two interceptions, the pick sixes that were thrown by Cleveland. They played really well offensively, and in this game, and this is why I think that the Ravens are going to win it all. They've already beaten the hell out of San Francisco. Sure, it's regular season, but they're going to play them if they get to the Super Bowl, and both teams do. They're going to play them on a neutral field. I look at this Ravens team, and I say, man, there have been 2 other Super Bowl teams in this century. The first one had maybe the greatest defense of all time. I'd still take the 85 Bears, but the 2000 Ravens were close. The team that won after the 2012 season, the defense was excellent, though Ray Lewis was aging. They had guys who were getting up there in years, and they weren't the same defensively. And offensively, Joe Flacco was not a Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, and they had no quarterback in the first one, but they were a little bit better offensively in that second Super Bowl. This team, top to bottom, The offense is so much better with Lamar Jackson and Odell Beckham, and they've got some other weapons. The running game looks pretty good right now. Isaiah Likely playing tight end did a great job, had a great catch. They may get Mark Andrews back for this upcoming game, and then they have the best kicker in the history of the game in Justin Tucker. So this is a better team than the one that won the Super Bowl, I think. They still got to prove it. They still got to win 2 more games, but I think this is the best team that they've ever had. And what they did defensively against Houston, I mean, they didn't just stop the run. They shut down the run. Houston ran the ball. Let me get the number here. Running. Oh, here it is, 14 for 38. So what is that, like a little about 2.5 yards a carry, something like that. 14 for 38. They were really stymied by that defense, and this is Roquan on doing that and how they were able to do it.
We stopped the run, but that's with any team. You stop the run, make a team one-dimensional, and it's going to be very hard to do anything. And that's something. That's credit to the big dogs up front. I think the best front 7 in football, starting with our front 4, whoever's in there, whatever the rotation is, and then the best 2 combo in the league with me and PQ. And so when you look at it like that, you stop the run, make them one-dimensional. That's when we let ball hawks and guys that make plays on the ball do what they do.
PQ, Patrick Queen. And since they changed the numbering system in the NFL, it's really cool to watch them. Roquan wears 0, Patrick Queen wears 6. You know, it's like you only used to see that in high school, maybe sometimes in college, these numbers. I kind of like it. It's kind of cool to see that. And 0 and 6, man, I mean, the linebacker play that we had here in Washington this year, it's like, you know, the difference between college and high school with what you're seeing from these 2 guys. And they've always, you know, linebacker play is a trademark of that organization, going back to Ray Lewis, of course. But the 2 of them together are terrific. This is Roquan on what he's seen from Lamar, and fortunately, he says, for him, seeing Lamar from the sidelines.
At the end of the day, I think he's the best quarterback in the game right now and doing what he do, and he can beat you in any facet of the game at the end of the day. So I'm just, like I tell people all year long, I'm grateful that I'm playing with him and not against him, because trying to deal with him, dropping back, you know, nothing's there, he takes off, or something's there, he's dropping it off there. So it's hard to game plan versus that, and you can't really emulate that. You can't do that in practice. So guys try to do it day in and day out, but hey, it never works, and we're on to next week.
Yeah, they're on to this game where they are 3.5-point favorites against the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. More on the Ravens. Tom Rivera's got a column about this today, and we've heard that the new ownership is really enamored with what Baltimore has done, and why shouldn't they be? I mean, it's been 25 years of success, really. I mean, if you look back, they came here as the Cleveland Browns in 1995, and great drafting by Ozzie Newsome to get guys like Ray Lewis in here and Jonathan Ogden, 2 guys, they were the same draft, both of them in the Hall of Fame. And Ed Reed and people like that, they knew what they were doing with the draft, and they have built a team that's consistently good. And you've heard that the Josh Harris group would really like to emulate what Baltimore has done. Reportedly, they're after Mike McDonald, or at least looking at him, the defensive coordinator. I still think they want to go offense, and I still think their top choice from everything I read is Ben Johnson. But you know, that's an alternative too, and he's coming from a great organization. And Rivera's got this in a column today. He says, Jim Nagy, former NFL scout and currently executive director of the Senior Bowl, posted this on social media Saturday during the Ravens' impressive win over the Texans. Quote, during draft time, you always hear Ravens scouts talking about finding guys who are, quote, Ravens. There's been so much stability that being a Raven means something. This is a roster filled with Ravens right now. So such a well-built and well-coached team, they'll be hard to beat. Yeah, I like them to win the Super Bowl. I think then that if it's going to be a rematch of what we had 11 years ago, I think it may even turn out to be similar to what we had. Now, I think Brock Purdy is a very good quarterback, and he was in the conversation for MVP, but when you've got a defense that's this good, an offense which is this good, and a quarterback who's this good, and the best kicker of all time, and it always comes down to that, I mean, to me, to me, that makes the Ravens the favorite. Got to do it. Got to win 2 games to get it done. But they're favored to do it at home on Sunday. And I would think whoever they play, whether it's Detroit or San Francisco, they'll be favored in the Super Bowl if they get there. Coming up, we got the Tony Kornheiser Show. I'll be back tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of what is going to feel like a balmy day, even though it's barely above 40 off of what we had this weekend. Enjoy it. See you back here tomorrow, 9 a.m.